This is the most secure embassy in the world, and its true power as a symbol of American might will surprise you. Situated in the heart of the former Green Zone in Baghdad, this 104-acre complex is the most secure and the largest U.S. embassy in the world, and its defenses have been tested numerous times. Arguably, the most famous incident was the 2019 attempted takeover of the embassy by Iranian-led protesters. But what exactly happened on that fateful day? And how did the embassy's security features protect it to prevent a complete disaster? So, what exactly caused there to be a giant mob literally throwing themselves at the gates of the U.S. Embassy that day in Baghdad? On that fateful day, there had been a funeral procession for several militia fighters who had been killed. But as Iraq had been embroiled in nearly 2 decades of conflict at this point, and funerals for the fallen were common, these were not uncommon circumstances. During the scourge that was ISIS, huge swaths of Iraqi territory fell under the terrorist banner. As ISIS advanced, the Iraqi military seemed to just melt away as terrorist armies advanced further and further south until they were knocking at the gates of Baghdad itself. In this moment of crisis, the Iraqi government had to raise new armies, buy weapons, and pay salaries with money that it did not have. And this is where Iraq made a deal with the devil. Seeing its opportunity to formally entrench itself in Iraq, Iran offered to fund, equip, train, and lead new volunteer formations of militia fighters called Popular Mobilization Forces. Of course, most of these groups would all be Shia, who are the largest minority group in Sunni-majority Iraq. After battling ISIS for more than 5 years, Iraq finally conquered them, and the whole country rejoiced. But there was a problem. When asked to demobilize, these militia groups refused to do so. Having cemented themselves as heroes in the eyes of the Iraqi public, these groups were reluctantly integrated into the standing Iraqi military. But of course, with many of them being Iranian-led and funded, they had to do Iran's bidding. This included funneling weapons through Syria to Hamas and Hezbollah and conducting attacks against U.S. troops. In December 2019, the U.S. military conducted airstrikes against some of the militia groups that were supplying weapons to terrorists. These strikes were made without the consent or knowledge of the Iraqi government. And this not only angered the militia supporters, but even neutral figures within the government who saw this as a massive violation of Iraqi sovereignty. Because of this, when the funeral procession began that morning, unknown to the Americans, figures in the Iraqi government up to the prime minister had given orders to the Iraqi police and military to stand down. As the crowd slowly grew from several hundred to several thousand people, the Americans watched in horror as Iraqi security forces stood by as they began marching in the international zone. While this was no longer the hyper-alert security situation of the early 2000s, large groups of people were still not authorized in the international zone in Baghdad. But as the crowd grew, armed militia members began directing the crowds. Soon enough, this once peaceful procession had now turned into a full-blown mob. As diplomatic security service personnel prepared for the worst, the crowd went on the attack. Within minutes of showing up at the front gates, the protesters began throwing anything they could at the embassy. Large stones, chunks of concrete, and homemade Molotov cocktails were all in the arsenal of handheld missiles being lobbed at the embassy. But that was not the worst of it. As groups of 50 or more protesters began human wave attacks on the embassy, they were met with a whole host of surface security features to prevent them from breaking through. The first obstacle they ran into was a 9-foot-tall blast-resistant barrier that spanned the length of the compound. These walls are meant to protect embassy staff from shrapnel caused by mortar rounds, rockets, and improvised explosive devices that might detonate outside the outer perimeter. However, their height also has an added benefit. These walls cannot be scaled because they are 9 feet tall and have nothing to grab onto. Instead, people seeking to enter the compound have to go through one of 5 heavily controlled access points, which are the next line of defense. At each of the secured access points, heavy steel gates are hydraulically operated. This helps for 2 reasons. First, the steel doors are blast-proof, and second, they can be closed remotely in the event that security personnel have to evacuate the checkpoint to a location further inside the compound. However, that is not the only thing that makes these checkpoints difficult to breach. If the protesters decide to try to ram the gates, they would be unable to do so. This is because in the driveway up to each gate, security personnel have placed giant concrete barriers that force incoming traffic to slow down and weave through them. Having all vehicles do this has the added benefit of not only controlling traffic, but also preventing an attacker's vehicle from gaining enough speed to punch through the gate. But even if a vehicle managed to force its way through, they would have a rough time dealing with the secret weapon they have waiting for them on the other side. Speaking of rough times, you can provide them to your enemies in a plethora of ways in the sponsor of today's video, War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat simulator ever made, and it's completely free on both PC and consoles. Take command of over 2,500 pieces of equipment from planes, tanks, ships, and armored vehicles. You can relive the battlefields of history from World War I to present day with one of our favorite features. Its realistic damage effects, customizable camouflage, and historically accurate markings make it seem like the battle is still ongoing. Further immerse yourself in the intense PvP combat of War Thunder, where the incredible graphics, sound effects, and X-ray damage view let you bring some of the most incredible military machines back to life, or experience what a real-life battle would be like today. Join a worldwide community of over 70 million players today for free, either on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox. But don't wait to join the fight in one of the best military history games today. New players and returning players who've not played in 6 months or more can get a massive bonus pack when signing up using the link in the pinned comment below. This bonus pack includes the exclusive Eagle of Valor decorator, 7 days of free premium access, and 100,000 Silver Lions. This is a limited time offer, so sign up today. Now, back to the video. If the protesters wanted to ram a vehicle through the hardened access points, they would be in for a rude awakening. Inside the Baghdad embassy and many other secure locations, there are either retractable bollards, giant metal plates, or both that security personnel can raise remotely in the event a vehicle forces its way through. And trust me, you don't want to see what these things can do to a vehicle. It makes hitting a speed bump at 30 miles per hour seem like no big deal in comparison. But these aren't the only outer defense systems in place. All along the outer perimeter are surveillance towers. Most of the time, these positions are unmanned, since security personnel don't want to leave anyone stranded in the event of a mass attack like this. However, that does not mean that these towers are not key assets. In fact, they are equipped with state-of-the-art CCTV, night vision, and infrared cameras to give staff a 360-degree view of what is going on. But they do have a vulnerability. As seen during the December 2019 attack, protesters got long, heavy poles and began whacking down every camera they could find. Of course, this did little to blind the embassy security team, but the fact that a simple pole can take these cameras down is a concern. But those were not the only surveillance towers the protesters had to contend with that day. Strung out all across the compound are manned watchtowers with guards armed with automatic weapons. These guards can either be American security contractors, who are often ex-military combat vets, or active-duty Marine embassy guards. Either way, these people have more than enough firepower to repel a small army like the one that accosted the embassy that day. However, the guards did not fire a shot. But why? Because the embassy staff knew the Iranians were trying to goad the guards into killing a protester, the lead security officer on the scene made the call not to fire any shots. Doing so would have certainly inflamed the situation to the point where the droves of armed men outside would have started firing their weapons, and the outcome may have been entirely different. Though no guard or Marine fired any actual gunshots, the officers of the Diplomatic Security Service did clash with protesters inside several checkpoints they had breached. Known for their professionalism and high level of training, the Diplomatic Security Service, or DSS, is the federal police agency tasked with helping defend U.S. embassies abroad. On that day, DSS officers were the primary people pushing back the agitators who had forced their way inside the gates. Careful not to use lethal force, the DSS officers employed tear gas, rubber bullets, and other non-lethal tools to convince protesters to turn away. In addition to battling crowds, these officers also battled fires caused by the hail of Molotov cocktails, since the contracted firemen were not authorized to work while under attack. And if that were not enough, the DSS officers also literally got into burning vehicles set ablaze by protesters and drove them to safety so other officers could extinguish the blaze. Of course, these physical measures are just some of the tools at the embassy's disposal to keep threats away, and it is the less visible ones that are truly amazing at keeping the embassy secure. Because security personnel have to monitor a massive 104-acre complex, they utilize state-of-the-art perimeter intrusion detection systems, or PIDs, to alert them whenever an intruder is detected. And if you thought this was your run-of-the-mill system from ADT, you would be surely mistaken. Although the exact type of PIDs employment by the embassy is unclear, we can be sure that the latest and greatest systems are in place. The basic premise in how the system works is that it alerts personnel when and where a potential breach has taken place. But unlike a home security system that blazes an alarm or announces what part of the home was open, PIDs does so much more. For instance, PIDs can use various sensors from electro-optical to night vision and infrared to monitor the entire perimeter. If an intruder manages to climb over a wall or rush past a checkpoint, then a variety of sensors, including motion sensors and even seismographs, could register movement and report it. If an intruder managed to break through the first line of defense, embassy personnel would be looking for who this person was. Obviously, security guards would be en route to arrest the person. But in the case of the 2019 attack, where thousands of people were involved, this would be easier said than done. In this case, the embassy would employ various facial recognition software to help identify the individuals. Normally, as part of the screening process for authorized visitors, the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad employs some incredibly powerful software programs. Created by the Secret Service to monitor sensitive locations like the White House, these facial recognition programs are normally used to help screen visitors against their identification cards to confirm identities. But in the event of a mass terrorist attack like in December 2019, the embassy personnel can use this powerful software to scan the crowds to pick out people of interest. It could be anyone directing the protesters, carrying firearms, or talking on a cell phone. Whatever is deemed suspicious behavior or something concerning, this tool can give staff real-time information about who is doing what on the ground. Another helpful use of facial recognition software is that it can provide to the brass back in the States with the justification needed to use military force. Of course, local terrorists would know that the embassy would be sending back information in real time, which is why they might try to impede it. The embassy has a secure way to ensure communications stay open, even if terrorists try to knock down cell towers or jam signals. In addition to some of the obvious deterrents like hardened cyber networks, the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad remains in 24/7 contact with its headquarters in Virginia, thanks to a system called the Diplomatic Telecommunications Service. In addition to the various classified and unclassified networks and telecommunications lines available, DTS is a redundant, specifically designed communication suite meant to ensure secure, reliable access even in the most austere environments. In a place like the Baghdad embassy on that fateful day, this communication suite was crucial since staff could send back footage and speak with, in real time, to higher headquarters back in the States. In fact, it is because of this free flow of communication that the situation didn't spiral out of control. The military wanted to send in scores of Marines and Army Rangers to help break the siege. However, embassy staff, thanks to their comm suites, were able to assuage those fears and let Washington know that they had everything under control. But what if the protesters wanted to do more than just throw themselves at barricaded checkpoints? One of the biggest fears in modern warfare is the use of drones. In the hands of terrorist groups like some of the popular mobilization forces, drones are a game changer. Not only can they spy on the embassy and report what security personnel are doing, but they can drop bombs and grenades on Americans. But thankfully, the embassy has a response to that too. The U.S. military and federal police agencies operate a wide variety of anti-drone equipment. Even though the exact anti-drone technology in place in Baghdad is not known for security reasons, the U.S. Embassy there probably employs the Silent Archer system. Though there are many anti-drone systems available, the Silent Archer is like the Rolls-Royce of them all. It can be outfitted onto buildings or vehicles and is small, light, and incredibly powerful. With the ability to scan for drones and jam their signals, the Silent Archer can stop just about any drone these protesters could throw at it. However, the Silent Archer is not a one-trick pony. In fact, the system is so good because it is made to counter drone swarms. In today's world, it's very rare for single drone attacks. Most often, drones attack in groups called swarms to overwhelm defenses. The Silent Archer is able to detect and disable these swarms with ease. And even though the protesters did not use armed drones that day, at least publicly, what would happen if they broke through the perimeter before staff had a chance to evacuate from one of the 3 helipads? As the terrorists began filling the embassy compound, a mass alert would have gone out over every loudspeaker and cell network, telling staffers to get to safety. In the event of such a catastrophic breach, an automated lockdown system would be activated. This would entail every outside door being instantly locked, lights going out, and select doors opening to show staff escape routes. As the terrorists try to gain entry into the various office buildings, living, and recreation spaces on the complex, they would be met with an eerie silence. This is because everyone would have gone underground. Although there have never been confirmed reports about the existence of an underground complex beneath the embassy, there's a good chance it is there. During the embassy's construction, no Iraqis were allowed to help build the complex. And while the Americans claimed operational security, there is good reason for the U.S. to want to avoid a similar situation to the 1979 Tehran takeover. During this infamous event, nearly 100 staffers were taken hostage at the American embassy in Tehran, mostly because they had nowhere to go. It is very likely, to prevent this from happening again, the U.S. constructed underground facilities to hide out and wait on military support in the event of a similar disaster. But what evidence is there for this? The embassy compound is a city within a city. The complex generates all of its own water, including sanitizing and reusing it, as well as generates its own electricity. But that's not all. The compound also has its own fire brigade, mail service, food storage, repair workshops, gym, mall, and everything an American could find at home. Because of this, it is not a stretch of the imagination to think that Americans would not be able to survive a prolonged period underground while the U.S. military forces came to rescue them. Thankfully, for embassy staffers on that fateful day, the world never got to see if the underground bunkers rumor was true. This is because DDS officers and Marines held their ground and did not fire any shots. as terrorist leaders saw they were not going to force the Americans to kill anyone, leadership within the Iraqi government authorized their military to clear out the protesters. Over the next day, control had been established over the perimeter, though sporadic attacks would continue, including a rocket attack just several weeks later. Again, we would like to thank War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Don't wait to play this awesome and totally free game. Make sure you click the link in the pinned comment below to claim your massive bonus pack, which includes premium vehicle skins, in-game currency, and more. But don't wait, this offer is a limited time deal for new and returning players. Bye for now.